Easthaven County, my beloved. This has been my most ambitious City Skylines project yet. And after more than 2 years and 60 episodes, I do feel like it's nearing completion. But not just yet. There is still work to be done here, important areas to develop. So if you're excited about Easthaven and the prospect of what might come after it, I hope you'll consider hitting the like button, adding a good vibey comment, and subscribing if you haven't already. With all the YouTube jazz aside, let's dive in. Now, if there's one specific area here in Easthaven County that is calling, or rather screaming for just a bit more attention, a bit more love, it would probably be the historic city of Mercy. I never really finish cities because I can never really achieve the scale necessary to say that. But in the case of Mercy, it's kind of lacking half of its downtown core, despite having plenty of suburbs and other interesting areas. So let's commit to a few nice upgrades and expansions to Mercy, starting with the embarrassingly empty Waterfront. So when I initially mapped out this area, which is for now called Parkside, I requested a bit of feedback from all of you on how to actually develop it and design it. And some pretty common suggestions was to either turn it into a Chinatown, an old town, or maybe a mixture of both. At the time, we didn't have specific DLCs or zones to really achieve this without a ton of detailing and prop use, but we do now. So I think that's the direction we're going for. To make the foundation of this new area a little more interesting, I think we should commit to a bit of terraforming and maybe revising the road layout a little bit, because we really don't have a lot of space currently. I mean, it's 2.5 blocks at best. So let's kick off with that. If there's something we need in Easthaven, it's gotta be ferries. I mean, if there was ever a city with a geographical layout that just begged for ferries, it's this one. And I think we can make Parkside a point of interest by adding the actual ferry depot out here. Now, it is probably going to just nullify some of the roads I just mapped out, but I would like the ferry depot to kind of turn in this direction instead of this direction, and then maybe just make it like slightly protected. Yeah, it sounds a little odd, but let me explain by doing instead, I think is what I'm going to call it. So I'm going to angle it like this, I think, and then I will be placing it about here. Get rid of a few of the roads. Just make sure that the building is kind of at the height of this road here. And then I guess this bridge is, yeah, kind of has to go already. And then we are going to just kind of map out so that we still have this small peninsula here, kind of covering the entrance and exit place of the ferry depot. I think planning-wise, this might not have been too bad a decision, and it's not often I get to say that with the stuff I decide on. So when I can carefully try to say that, I'm gonna take it. There is going to be someone in the comments telling me why this would be a bad planning decision, but I'm gonna ignore that comment and just carry on. Anyways, I think the peninsula here would provide a decent cover from, you know, I don't know, high tides or some stormy weather. Although technically we are already decently covered from the Atlantic at least. But anyways, this would provide an extra level of cover in terms of rough weather. And these ferries are rather small, so I'm really trying narratively here to justify this one. Not sure how well it's working, but yeah, we're going for it. Let's just get it connected up and see how it all looks. So before I place any of the first ferry stops, and I am thinking that a direct connection between Mersey and Fort John is going to be the very first connection we map out, I would like to revamp the cemetery here in Parkside just a little bit. So one reason is that I'd like to lower the shoreline here quite a bit, because it's not visible from out far, but moving in close, there's like, I don't know, a height of 14 or 16 meters or so from the surface of the water to these sidewalks here. And if I'm to create an interesting promenade here, I think I need to lower that quite a bit. However, the cemetery and the height that it is kind of locked at due to it being directly facing the Margaret Mercy Hospital is kind of causing issues. So my approach would be to get rid of the columbarium, then adding in the mausoleum instead, and I'm just gonna align it all the way up to the cemetery, and then getting rid of this lane right here. Then I'll get rid of this slightly weird pathway as well, and some of the textures I've mapped out, because that just about gives us enough place to continue Castle Hill Street and pretty much just lower the entire waterfront here to a slightly better height in terms of like having it be an actual desirable waterfront area. So if I just may make this connection right here, we move into road services and add a retaining wall at least to these 3 segments, then I think we can start lowering Castle Hill Street without causing much in terms of issues. So I think at least getting all the way down here is probably just going to be a better fit, and it's just going to look better when we have storefronts and shops and whatnot aligned towards the street here, and we have the ferry stop in place as well, offering direct connections and so on. I think that's a pretty big improvement. So yeah, that's I like that a lot. I still think the cemetery, the park, is like the main focal point of the area. It's still very much a standout feature, but it seems just a little better integrated with the actual waterfront here. Now, in terms of getting the ferries up and running, I'm just quickly going to add the stop over here in the back bay area of Fort John, preferably really close to downtown and the insane population density here, and the amount of jobs here as well. Of course, there's 4,500 current jobs here in Fort John downtown, with 12,500 residents. So maybe we can just about squeeze it in here. We already have a bit of parking to boot. Yeah, it is a little shallow, so I am going to be cheeky and maybe just kind of deepen things around the parking lot just a little bit. And then let's see, we'll open the ferry menu, and not gonna try anything fancy here. I think I'm just gonna add the, let's see, so this is something you add to a key, which is not necessary. And this one kind of pokes out a little bit, which I think is actually kind of what we want in this particular case here. Just to get a little away from the shoreline. So I think I'm just gonna try placing that right here, and that is more or less, I would say, plug and play. Just taking a bit of time getting a few of these boulders out of the way, because obviously they probably aren't as necessary on the inside area of the small ferry stop here. I'll just remove 2 of these boardwalk props, and maybe I can align this a little better, just kind of squeezing it into the side here. Perfect. I think we'll just be utilizing the same type of stop on this side here, because it kind of just works. So if I can align it so that it is directly in front of the mausoleum, that is it's going to be a nice little feature, I think. So something like this. Then just moving in to ensure that the elevation is looking all right. I think we might be able to just bring it back a little bit to align some of the fencing here. Now, I'm not too worried about turning these roads into quays because I think we're going to utilize like a wooden boardwalk or some sort over here instead of just having the regular vanilla quays. So I'm just going to do a bit of extra terraforming before we get into that. The boatway connection should be fairly simple because we obviously already have plenty of ocean-going traffic moving in between these straits and these open bays here. Let's see, we'll just connect it to the end here, move out into the open major waterway. So hopefully the ferries can navigate this space at the same time as some of the larger vessels without having to like wait or queue up. But if they can't, I think we'll just create like alternative routes for them. One stop in Fort John and of course a stop over here in Mercy. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's any weird clipping or anything with these ferries as they try to dock at these small stops we've created, but hopefully no issues. I am just going to check if I can reduce the amount of vehicles to just a one as a start, and then we can always add an additional one. And this also begs the question, how much actual traffic will we be seeing here? I suppose some people are going to prefer this commute, but I really don't know. So the initial docking seems to work just fine without issue, or it's at least as good as it's gonna get in terms of clipping into anything. This one is returning as instructed, and this is going to be the only active vessel on this line for now. So currently it does seem to kind of follow the exact same tracks as the bigger vessels, so I might just map out a special route just for these ferries because I think that would be a little more fun. They can obviously move a lot closer to the coastline given the fact that they are so small. But a really cool thing to see is that we actually have the first passengers here, and this is the very first time this ferry is docking. So that is awesome to see. So far we have 13 passengers waiting, 16, 20. So how many people are actually going to board this thing? Okay. So I guess it didn't really wait for additional passengers. This guy is on a busy schedule, it would appear, but that's really nice. We even have 2 passengers waiting over here by Parkside. I think with these final tweaks to the road layout, just to get these curvy bits a little more curvy, I suppose, and the placement of this new ferry line, we're just about ready to dive into the actual development of Parkside. So the main fabric of this area is going to be the old town North America stuff, and then I'll do my best to weave in as much as possible from the Dragon Gate creator pack without turning it into a dedicated Chinatown per se, but just making sure that it has very strong Asian influences and vibes throughout. Alright, so I think it's time for a halfway mark check-in on Parkside, because as you can probably tell, I ended up changing plans quite a bit as I started developing it. So I think thematically, it's turned out a lot more rough than I initially planned for. Of course, skate parks are always just rough places with dangerous individuals. Doing the best boomer impression here I can. But we've also got some empty lots with some ugly tagging and graffiti, and just a much more diverse mix of assets than I initially planned. And I think part of the reason was that when I started placing down these wonderful old town assets, I just kind of felt like, you know, they are a little New Orleans French Quarter vibes to me, especially with the extensive balconies and the very interesting roof structures. So I didn't want to stray too far away from the more classical Northeast architecture, this heavy red brick-clad facade that kind of dominates not just much of Easthaven, but Mercy as a city especially. So I pretty much just ended up mixing in some of the brickwork from the Northeast and the vanilla packs as well, and I think it worked out pretty well. I think we're off to a really great start here. Now I'd also be very curious to see how our ferry line is doing. We still only have a single little ferry navigating the strait here, so let's have a look at the passenger count. 62 passengers and 13 doggos. Now that's not too bad, I'd say. How many people are waiting? 333 people are waiting at the back bay stop. How does that even look in game? Oh my. I mean, this is wonderful. It's a very, very popular mode of transportation, but I need to accommodate this. So I think we'll start by increasing the assigned vehicle count to, let's go for 3 and see if that can handle demand. I mean, the capacity of each ferry is pretty impressive, to be honest. Now this blue, I'm sure it's called something else, but all I see is blue, as a little too much in your face. So let's go for something, I say in your face and then I go for a dark purple, but yeah. Can we dim down the overall look of the ferry? Not really, I guess there isn't too much to change. Oh, we can make this accent here on top black, which I think is pretty nice. So hopefully the addition of the 2 additional ferries is going to help sort this out, because yeah, there's a lot of throughput here. I do wonder how the stop in Parkside is actually looking. So that seems to be, you know, it seems like we're able to handle the capacity needed here, so that's always nice. We will get back to wrapping up Parkside before we wrap up this episode, but I feel like doing something else might be good in terms of just like resetting my mentality, since I took quite a few spontaneous choices building it out. Also, I don't think Parkside is really the name for it, so if you've got a suggestion, just fire away. For something a little different, I think we're going to get all the way, let's see, out here, I'm trying to find it, all the way out to the Easthaven Coast Guard Station, because we're using a lot of different vehicles in an attempt to simulate an active Coast Guard, but we don't really have to anymore, because there's a Coast Guard vessel on PDX mods now, so I have been looking forward to implementing this one. Searching for Coast Guard or Cutter in Find It didn't net me any results, but apparently it's just called Warship in game, and it's sorted under industrial props, and it floats. And would you look at that? Now that is very, very nice. So what I think we're going to do is I think we're just gonna keep it placed here. So this key here was always meant for a major Coast Guard vessel, and I think we're gonna keep this ship in place because the narrative we built was that this one had been kinda escorted into the Coast Guard station. Maybe there's like some goods or something that needs to be, I don't know. I don't actually know what Coast Guards do, but I do know that this is looking really cool, and it floats, bouncing up and down as the waves go on, which is so cool to see. And you might have noticed I have a few other fun vehicles we can place. A Black Hawk is probably a little much for a Coast Guard, but it is a static helicopter prop, so I think it would be fun to get that placed as well. Can I? No, I can't recolor it. Oh well, but I mean, that looks pretty cool. I also grabbed this proper Screw the Planet yacht. So let's see, I think we have a few of the baby brothers of this one placed, yeah, in here by Queen's Cape. So maybe we'll just get this guy placed right here. Don't know if this one floats though. Oh, it does. How nice is that? Yeah, lots of activity down here. Now, if you're wondering why I haven't replaced these wonderfully creative custom boats with the actual official ships and boats we have in game now, it's mainly due to a scale thing. It feels like the scale of the yacht and the sailboat in game is just a bit off. They're just a bit too big. So seeing as this is like a from afar thing, I'm just kind of keeping it, I think. Okay, so the clip you just watched of me complain about the size of the boats was recorded yesterday, and in the meantime a boat pack has been uploaded to PDX Mods. So I don't know if we're going to call this divine or magical intervention by the almighty gods of chaos or just pure perfect timing, but we now have a bunch of beautiful floating boat props that we can replace all of these static props with. It is with a slightly heavy heart I remove all of these props here, because they pretty much marked a time of unrivaled creativity, I feel, within City Skylines 2, when creators were conjuring this stuff based on a ton of weird props, making it look like boats, like trains, like custom buildings, and everything in between. But we do have the real floating deal now, so I think it's time for a bit of an upgrade. But a massive shout out to all the creators that kind of bridged the gap between the troublesome release of the game and the long wait time until official asset support. I'm not gonna replace these wooden piers by Harbour Master J though. They just look super nice, and I guess they're a nice memory of the local asset time. But let's get the modern boats mixed in. So these are located on the water transportation menu, and this wavy symbol here kind of indicates if it's a floating or a non-floating version. Oh, that looks pretty nice if you ask me. Let's get a nice cinematic look of these boats in action. Adding a bit of shading here. Early in the morning. Look at them go, bobbing around. That is so cool. You probably also saw me replace some of the more static boat props we utilized out here by Queen's Cape. because obviously we have some fairly wealthy residents in this area, many of them having their own boat piers and access to direct access, I should say, to their boats. Now, if there was another argument in favor of it being Chaos Guard magical intervention and not just lucky timing, it would be the fact that there was another cool pack released to PDX mods in the past 24 hours, one which I can really utilize here in Parkside. This is a rowhouse pack by Smileys, in my opinion, a legendary Cities 1 asset creator. I'm already utilizing a mixed use asset by Smileys right here, but we now have access to the jelly bean rowhouses, and these are just wonderful because they're all timber or wooden constructions, so no brick. And I know I said I wanted to mix in some brick here, and I think I have done that, but the main thing I want to do to kind of just diversify from the Old Town zone is just getting rid of, you know, some of these overhangs here that give me that super cool, but maybe not super applicable fringe quarter vibes here in Mercy. And these ones are just perfect for that. So I'm just gonna add a few so you can like get an idea of how they look. And in a situation like this, with a bit of a gap in the courtyard here, I might just add, or try to add at least, like a small alley of sort. It is a one-way, so I am going to add a small roundabout, but I think I should have, sorry, I'm gonna add a small cul-de-sac so that it doesn't strictly look like a roundabout. And then I'm just gonna see if I can like kind of hide it just a little bit. And the idea here is that maybe we can get a few cars parked here, which I think would be really nice. And if we need a bit more in terms of decoration, we also have the very first functioning custom tree added to PDX mods. This time by Pedelmo, and if you're in the know, it's the same case as with Smiley's, absolute legend of CS1 asset creation. I'm gonna add a few of these and they just look amazing. So the first edition here is the leafy tree, and I'm pretty sure I abused a version of this extensively in Cities 1. Now, as far as I know, there is still missing an LOD model for this one, so it's probably not something you want to utilize as a thick, dense forest currently, because that might tank your performance. But I guess on the flip side, it actually looks pretty nice from afar, where some of the vanilla trees kind of degrade a bit when they switch to the LOD. Either way, exciting times ahead of us with all this custom stuff being added. So a close-up of Smiley's row houses, and just look at these things. Beautiful work throughout. Alright, I think it's time for us to map out a bit of Parkside's waterfront, since it is looking just a little barren and a little rough currently. So we're just gonna level terrain a little bit just to provide us with a bit more space in terms of detailing. And I want to keep it relatively simple, so there might have been some form of industry here, some light manufacturing, or some, we can imagine some stuff for loading and unloading local ships utilizing this waterfront. Now it's mainly just a recreational space and perhaps a small marine as well. So we're gonna keep things really simple, add some of the vanilla pathways, utilize some surfaces in between just to add some nicely manicured grass. I know I said pathways, but I am probably going to add a key instead, just to get the outer key done as well. So I'm going to opt for the shallow rib pattern narrow key with pedestrian path, and just create a really simple stretch covering the entire waterfront, and then just add a bit of interest to it in a few locations. Hopefully I can cut through the ferry stop here without causing any pathing issues or otherwise. Yeah, it is complaining a little bit, but we'll get that sorted. And then over here, where we might have a marina of some sort, we'll probably just mix up this design a little bit. We'll get a few quick paths added in, just for easy connectivity for the pedestrians. Of course, using the area bucket tool to fill in the surfaces real easy. I'm going to use rodent net as the only boundary. increase the size to like 190, which should very much cover our needs. And then I think I'm going to grab one of Sully's wonderful manicured grass. Let's grab the checkered larch and just see how that works. And you may have to just try to align your mouse in a certain way. As you can see here, if I just move up to this corner here, I get pretty much the best coverage I can hope. Just so it's even easier for you to cover as much as possible. In some instances, like here for instance, it's better to move the mouse out here to the edge of the pier. Or the key here that seems to cover up most of this space. But then again, if you have to do like a little manual tweaking, then that's a very small price to pay for such an awesome mod feature. And in my specific case, I usually don't even bother changing this up to ensure that there's like full coverage unless it's a very contrasty surface. In this case, it's like a happy little Bob Ross mistake, I think. I don't want to spend too much time detailing up the waterfront here in Parkside, not with so much left to be done in terms of actually developing the area, which does include what I hope to be a pretty interesting idea of adding some small narrow lanes in here on either side of the mausoleum. So with that in mind, it's probably just going to be a few small pocket parks and maybe some trees. So yeah, if I can start by just adding this urban pocket park, which will enable you to, at the very least, just grab a quick bite like that. And then in terms of the trees, I'm kind of tempted to utilize Pidelmo's leafy tree once more. And yeah, let's just keep the two larger versions in place. And I'll just freely add these with, you know, a bit of distance between them. I think that does the trick, to be honest. And we are already seeing lots of people utilizing this space recreationally. Of course, some will be commuters as well, utilizing the ferry. But it is turning into a really pleasant location. Lots of dining and shopping options along the waterfront here. And what should be a pretty decent view of the downtown core of Fort John there in the distance. Now moving on to actually wrapping up the development here in, what was it, Parkside? Yeah. Let's get this road idea I had in place first, because that is very much going to affect the space I'll need to develop. So my plan here is to grab this narrow single laner with parking on one side and disable any form of snapping. They're probably just gonna pause the game as well. And I'll need to get rid of the retaining walls as well. So this doesn't cause any issues, I think. And then I think I'll be flattening terrain here to about the same level as the surrounding streets. And you might be able to kind of figure out what the idea is by now, but it's basically just to add like an additional layer of small streets so that we can add a few additional pocket parks really, or maybe a few additional row houses or something really cozy. And kind of just frame the mausoleum even more so than we're currently doing. Because we'll be replacing the retaining walls we just removed by just adding them to the insides of these new streets here. And just kind of allowing that to be elevated a little bit. So something like this, probably just going to work a little bit on the adjustments here so that things are a little better aligned. And just a bit of terraforming to make sure that the retaining wall looks pretty symmetrical. Then having a look at the final version, and I do think that's a lot more interesting than the like the previous version. And it's a reminder to myself to utilize these retaining wall features to their full extent, because it's something I never really get to utilize all that much, but it does add a nice extra layer of like complexity and interest. All right, so a lot of interesting stuff going on all of a sudden, and I kind of increased the scope a little bit. So much so that we now have Parkside, which is flanked by Parkside Little as well. And I think both areas turned out really nice. And there is some different interesting aspects here that hopefully help tell the story of a district, which is always super important, at least if I'm trying to give a place like a sense of character. So obviously much of Parkside does look a little rough around the edges. We've got some pretty old apartment buildings that, you know, would be due for a renovation soon, hopefully. But there are glimmers of redevelopment and positive change and even gentrification, whether you like it or not. Obviously, the corner lot here between Amity Street and Jasmine Street has seen a relatively recent injection of cash flow with this modern development. A pretty stark contrast to this corner, I would say. But it is an interesting aspect, and it does tell a story of a neighborhood that is undergoing some change. And we actually see the very same pattern play out if we move a bit further south into Parkside Little. So much of this area is rough, and it's more rough than Parkside, nestled in between industry, a paper factory, and a loud highway tunnel. And still there are glimpses of redevelopment and gentrification. This used to be some sort of dirty manufacturing plant at some point in time, but it has obviously been renovated for a pretty significant $1 million amount, and it now hosts a baker and confectionery, and probably a bit more than that as well. I think it's a fun building that hopefully conveys a story and adds character to the neighborhood, especially since it's in such stark contrast to these row neighborhoods here. Now, I was a bit tempted to add the Chinese gate props to the entrances of Parkside, but to be fair, this really isn't all that much of a Chinatown. It's only a quarter of the way there, I would say. It's definitely a community with a large percentage of probably Southeast Asian inhabitants, and therefore a pretty large percentage of Southeast Asian owned businesses as well. So I imagine this is where you can get the best Asian food, definitely, in all of Easthaven County. But it's not specifically a Chinatown. When I look at the Parkside waterfront, I kind of feel like building a small, cozy marina. We've got sort of an area here, which I think, just for a bit of narrative purposes, I am going to define as the inner harbor. I always like just adding districts, giving places names, and, you know, it just adds to the feeling of actual places. So we're just going to call this the inner harbor. And I think this would be a decent location for a small marina, especially since this waterway is no longer used by industrial traffic. And what I mean by that is that if you're a subscriber, you might recall that some of the history and narrative of Mercy is that this waterway used to be navigated by small industrial barges. We even still have a bit of industry in here that is still functioning, but they don't rely on the barges for imports or exporting of goods anymore. So this is pretty much just recreational space by now. So I don't mind kind of blocking off the waterway a little bit by poking out with a marina here. Now, obviously, we need to ensure that the ferries have easy access out into the open seas, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. Especially if we use Move It to just kind of adjust this segment here just a little bit, which I don't think is, yeah, that's really easy to just get that configured. So let's add a few piers here. I think the first thing I'm gonna do is just kind of mark the outer boundary of this marina by adding a narrow concrete pier. We're gonna have wooden piers for the actual small boats to anchor to, or not anchor, park? Yeah, it's not park either. One of the terms, but for now I think this is a fun definition of like the outer area. and then utilizing the narrow wooden leisure pier to just get in the places where boats will dock. Let's go with dock before this gets embarrassing. Now, please don't go thinking that I am some pro cities player who just nails the placement on the very first try. There's a lot of move it manipulation, especially behind the scenes, that I don't want to bore you all with, so don't feel discouraged if your initial placement is a little wonky. That is what move it is for, saving the day. Now, in terms of this marina, I think it's going to be mainly a recreational marina, which I guess most marinas are, but some will have, you know, extensive storage or repair facilities and stuff like that. That's not gonna be the case here. I might add like a small warehouse building with some basic supplies and a place to like register your arrival or something like that. But it's mainly just a recreational marina. You dock your boat to primarily just enjoy Mercy and Parkside during the, I guess, summer season in particular. This boat pack it's just awesome. What a fantastic edition. I am so excited about all the possibilities now that we have somewhat official modding support. I know some people have been, I don't know, surprised about the amount, or rather the, I guess, lack of custom assets thus far, but we're only a couple of months in, and as far as I know, it's quite a different process in terms of actually creating assets for Cities 2 compared to Cities 1. So the whole thing of just kind of porting your Cities 1 stuff into Cities 2 is, as far as I know, not really going to work unless you do some pretty significant changes to not just update the prefab potentially, because Cities 2 allows for much more detailed, intricate assets, but also texture changes. And yeah, it's a bit of a ramble now because I don't really know the specifics, but I've heard something like that being said. So let's give people some time. There's probably also just a bit of skepticism with the developer change. People are just kind of waiting it out, seeing what's actually going to happen, which I think is fair. But I think the stuff we've gotten thus far, like at least the stuff I have carefully selected, is just such high quality and just I'm so excited. Also because I am still going to say that I believe that the amount of stuff that is available in the vanilla game, especially if you add in the paid for DLCs, CCPs, and of course all the free region packs, it's a very substantial amount of content. Like, there's enough in there to get really creative. It's so much fun to work with that I think adding like maybe a small pier next to this renovated development on this side of the inner harbor could be a bit of fun as well. Something simple like an addition like this, just gonna make sure of course that the height is decently aligned, gonna bring that down a bit and bring it out a bit so that the stairs aren't too steep, but something like this is going to allow for a few additional boats. While on the topic of boats, let's kick it up a notch to ships, because I also grabbed the US Navy DDG-112 USS Michael Murphy, and I think I'm going to turn this into a decommissioned museum ship. So importantly, I need to grab the prop version of this, because otherwise it's going to act all wonky, because it technically functions as a cargo ship. So the way I do this by following the mod author description is to go for 112 and find it, and I'll be able to find the prop version just like that. Now it is pretty sizable, so I'll have to be careful with the placement, but I don't think something like this would be totally unreal. I might just adjust the like ferry line a little bit, but I think this alignment is going to work all right. So I'm gonna get that placed, and then I am going to grab the concrete leisure pier, and I think we're just going to expand on this segment here to allow for direct access, of course, into this ship. So I'll just add, I think I'll just add a couple of pathways. Something like this. It's gonna look a little weird, mind you, but don't think it's too bad. And align them to the correct height, something like that. Just see if I can get this connection in place. I don't think that turned out half bad. It's a pretty simple, slightly crude implementation of the idea. I mean, you could probably build like a more dedicated platform for it and a visitor center, but I think it works. As I'm about to wrap up this episode of Easthaven, I have a couple of humble feedback requests. So the first one being the name of Parkside and Parkside Little. I really like the idea of these two districts sharing part of the name. So if you can kind of wrap that into your naming suggestion and potentially narrative, that would be awesome. So looking forward to anything here, just fire away in the comments. And then for suggestions in terms of more specific development, I need a bit of input on what to actually do with this weird peninsula. It's many episodes ago that we mapped out a few currently unused freight rail tracks down here, and you can come up with any suggestion. I am completely open. I don't have any ideas of my own, basically. It can be defunct, like a, turned into a redeveloped area, anything really. So yeah, once again, fire away with ideas. I'm looking forward to some cool input on this one. And then for a much broader general suggestion, I'm looking into starting a third major city series to run alongside Seaburg and Easthaven. Now I'm probably going to cut down the amount of time I spent working on Easthaven to prioritize the new series, because Easthaven is by now so developed. I don't think I'll ever get to really finish cities, but this county is definitely getting there. So obviously, if you have any suggestions at all for a fun, realistic, or just sort of realistic city idea, once again, just go ham in the comments. Don't restrict yourself. I don't feel obligated to choose a suggestion. I might just come up with something on my own. So you shouldn't feel obligated to fit it into a specific genre either. You can just go ham, basically. And as always, I want to thank you guys so much for the just incredible support throughout the entirety of last year. Yeah, it warms my heart and makes me all fuzzy. And thank you for watching. Of course, I'm gonna wrap up with one final change, because we now have a dedicated Coast Guard boats. I'm not sure I will be able to squeeze one into this launch platform, so I'm gonna keep the prop version for now. Actually, I'm probably gonna be able to, so let's just get a few of the dedicated ones added. Because the cool thing with this boat pack is that you get them in these like floating versions, but you also get a prop version. So I should be able to get rid of this fella and get this guy added in here instead. The local asset prop version has really done its duty before Paradox mods, but now with the official assets, I think this was a nice change to wrap up on. Thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.